So, hi, folks. We've got an absolutely amazing man guest today. Somebody that I admire. I admire anybody that kind of stands up for their beliefs. And it's the Reverend Canon Phil Harris. Hopefully, I've done your title correctly. Is that right?
Yeah, you have. I mean, so some people put the father in there because it was like
Yes.
Father Phil.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Canon Father Phil or whatever. Really, Liam, I'm not precious.
Fantastic. Now, of course, you came to prominence last year when you were very critical of Keir Starmer because of the riots that went on and what happened in Southport and everything, and that went absolutely viral. But however, that's had a knockback effect on you since you made that speech. I mean, obviously, there's been incidents that have happened to you very recently, which we're going to talk about. What has
Yeah.
been the reaction of the public to you, and how have you coped with the attention and everything?
Oh, Liam, really, really good questions. So for me, as a priest in the Church of God, and let me just reiterate, I made my statement as a priest. And when we are ordained as clergy, as a clerk in holy orders, we have a responsibility in that charge that we are given when we're ordained to actually contend for truth and for righteousness and contend for the faith, and to actually stand up for people who are being disaffected by the world and what's going on around us. And so I watched last year, and I just became more and more perplexed at um, the state of the way that we were being governed and how ordinary people were being persecuted, and how we got to a situation where we clearly weren't being told the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Mhm.
And so one Saturday morning, having watched the previous few weeks and seeing that people in the nation were people of this nation were being um, treated differently, and seeing the backdrop of the rapes that we now are aware of,
Mhm.
and we had the colonel in his army green stabbed outside of his barracks, and we then ended up with Southport after the Manchester incident. All of these things happened very, very quickly. And I had a parishioner sit with me who actually said to me, Phil, I've just been called far right
Mhm.
by the Prime Minister. And not only that, a far right thug. I'm a retired professional person.
Mhm.
And was really very, very, very upset that there was a rhetoric that was coming out of number 10 Downing Street.
Mhm.
And I sat in the vestry, and I'd been making notes all week. And I went, I have to speak out. Now, up until that point, I'd had 8 years of impeccable, and I use the word impeccable in inverted commas because, that in itself is the way that you view this is kind of emotive. So, impeccable in whose standards? So, 8 years of impeccable behavior in the public square of following the narrative.
Mhm.
Um, so, is that actually being truthful and impeccable, or am I just towing the line? And I
Mhm.
just realized that we have to speak out. And one of the phrases that I've used in the public square lots recently is there's a verse in the Bible that says, the kingdom of God is righteousness, peace, and joy in the Holy Spirit. And I just felt the Holy Spirit speak to me and say, look, there's no peace without righteousness, and there is no joy without peace. And if we think that through, we realize that the Bible's true, that it's right. We have to do the right thing, do we not, Liam? And so
Mhm.
I sat there and I did what I felt was the right thing. And as you've highlighted, the video went viral. Maya Tuzi lifted it off my Twitter feed and put it onto his
Mhm.
onto Tuzi TV,
Mhm.
and I had literally thousands of people reaching out to me, and a
Mhm.
handful of people who tried, and literally you can count them on one hand, who
Mhm.
well, two hands maybe, that tried to kind of object to what was said. So we saw the mood of the nation. The shame for me is people that I thought were supportive and friends wanted to continue towing the line. And
That's interesting. Did you feel, and I know we go on to this in a moment, did you feel the people around you support you? Because it takes a lot of guts and bravery to just stand up and have that sort of contrary opinion to the government. Did you realize what the ramifications might be?
oh, Liam, do you know you're the first person out of all the interviews I've done that's actually asked me that question? Did I
Mhm.
realize? Oh, so I knew I had to speak out. So let me make that statement first of
Mhm.
all. Um, did Was it a spur of the moment thing? No, I thought it through, and I realized that I had to speak out in the way that I spoke out. Did I think that there would be the backlash from certain people? No, if I'm honest.
Mhm.
Would I have still done it if I had have known the backlash?
Mhm.
Yes, because it's
Because you
about
spoke from the heart, you spoke from truth, didn't you? So you felt that you had to do this, but you are taking on a government that is sort of fairly cancel culture and this, that, and the other, and also maybe a church that is seen nowadays that doesn't really stand up so much. Were you disappointed in the church?
yes, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
I was disappointed particularly by a certain bishop. Let me qualify, if I can, my situation. I left the Church of England in 2009, and since 2013, my license as a priest in the Church of God has been held in the American church. When I put the video out, and it went like this, Liam. It's Sunday the following day. This is Saturday. I think it was the
Yeah.
3rd of August, if I remember correctly. And I put the video out and I posted it. And I normally got about 60,000 views on a video
Mhm.
that I would put out. And I'd spoken a lot about Israel in kind of those videos.
Yes.
But what I did was recorded it, shot the video, and then posted it and put my phone on do not disturb because I'm now in as a clergyman
Mhm.
preparing for Sunday services.
Mhm.
So my phone's off. I'm
Yes.
sitting there, I'm writing my sermon for the following Sunday, and I'm putting the order of service together for the next day. And so I do finish my sermon, which I've been preparing throughout the week, and I finish the order of service and I go home and I turn my phone on. And my phone has blown up. I mean, say like it's like blown up. And so, kind of, hang on, what's going on here? So I just kind of 600,000 views, at
Yeah.
that point, and like
Yeah.
this is in the matter of a few hours. And Amy Meck and others had got hold of this, and it's just kind of taken off. And I stopped and I paused, and I thought, this could be a problem. So I called my diocesan bishop in the US, and bearing in mind 5 hours behind,
Yeah.
and I said, Bishop, I might have created a problem. And I was fully prepared to delete, because I'm a man with authority because I'm under authority, right, Liam?
Yes. Yes.
We don't act completely as an island.
No.
Um,
So you considered deleting it, did you?
yes. So
Yeah.
I contacted my diocesan bishop in the US, and I said I might have created, a problem, and so inadvertently created a problem. And he said, "You better send it to me." Now the video was 8 minutes long,
Mhm.
and let me just interject there. When things did blow up, I said to Ruth, my wife, "Have I just ruined 8 years of impeccable ministry and reputation in an 8 minute video?" And if we can come back to that thought in a moment,
Mhm.
Liam, I'd like to go down that route if that's possible.
Yeah.
So I contacted my bishop in the US, and he said, you better send the video to me. So I sent the video, and it was 10 minutes later. So it had obviously arrived. He had opened it, watched it, thought about it, came back to me, and he went, Canon, great job, crack on.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So then there's another part to this. And he said, by the way, I'll let the Archbishop know. So this was the Archbishop of the Anglican Church in North America. So I am licensed to another jurisdiction to work as their ecumenical officer. And I contact, and so this, I guess, is my boss, directly on a day-to-day basis. And I reach out to him and I said, Archbishop, I've done this, and Bishop Bill says it's okay. And so he said, right, you better send it to me. And so I sent it to him, and he came back a few moments later, like 15 minutes later, and he went, great job, carry on declaring the truth, carry on speaking about righteousness. And that was kind of the moment when I realized, it was good to have authority that was outside of this country.
Yes. Yes.
That gave me the freedom to speak out. And so that was kind of a moment. What I didn't see was what was going to happen, the kind of throughout the following week. Can I just say that Archbishop Robert has received 3 emails about me. Out of all of the positives, 3 emails about me, and he's bounced them back, actually defending the cause. But we don't have this massive outrage,
No,
against the videos that people are trying to portray there is.
of course, because most people agree with you. I mean,
Yes.
really.
Correct.
Now,
Correct.
one of the things I'm always interested, sorry to interrupt there. One of the things I'm always interested in is the person behind the message and stuff. How did your wife view this? How was she immediately supportive, or did she say, "Come on now, you may have gone a bit far here. You might want to delete this."
So I, when I shot the video, and you asked me, around the context of, did I think there'd be an effect? I tongue in cheek, and it literally was tongue in cheek, called her and said, I've just put a video out, and it might be interesting. Yeah. Right. But it was a tongue in cheek comment. What she was doing was watching the responses on my X account and realized that the church had failed the people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And was absolutely encouraging, and was having all these people following, because there was this affirmation that for once in recent times, a clergyman had stood up and spoke out, the narrative, against the narrative that we were being fed, and people were crying out for the church to stand up for them, as opposed to, applaud the circumstances or be quiet about the circumstances that were going on in around the nation.
Did you realise that by the very fact that you are a priest or vicar, I'm not sure what the correct term is, that it would be so important to people because you do carry that authority, people respect your position?
Yeah, great question. So in the UK, if you are a parish priest, you're a vicar. In the US, you're a rector. There are some rectors in the UK. I won't unpack that for you. It's kind of why there's a vicar and rector. They're basically the same. So, but yeah, so I'm a priest. But so I just felt that it was important that the church actually speaks out. And I become very, very concerned that, so as a Christian, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the way. So as Christians, how can we then be complicit and applauding other religions
Mhm.
if Jesus is declaring that he's the only way to the Father?
Mhm.
And I had watched the Archbishop of Canterbury, the previous, um, at Easter last year, applauding Ramadan, as has happened since this year. But this is a Christian country, and we need to be standing up for Christian values and Christian things. I just felt that it was important as a clergyman, and hence the hashtag,
Mhm.
which was Far Right Thugs Unite. And so, to answer your question directly, Rafe, the historian, and Dame Andrea Jenkins and others were, using this hashtag.
Yes.
These are MBEs
Yeah.
and dames, and so what I kind of rationalized was, as a priest with an impeccable reputation
Mhm.
up until that point, if I spoke out and tongue in cheek used the same hashtag of Far Right Thugs Unite, that would actually just show how nonsensical the situation was, and it would help calm the context down, because part of the reason for the video was to actually say to people to remain peaceful
Mhm.
and
Yes,
please demonstrate, but remain peaceful.
absolutely. Yeah.
And so I felt, as a priest, one, I was attempting to calm it down.
Mhm.
Two, I was making the point, tongue in cheek, that this is utter nonsense what the Prime Minister has said in
Yes.
labelling the centrists of yesteryear far right.
Yes.
And look, hey, there were some thuggery,
Yeah, of
and,
course.
and we would all absolutely condemn that. But that
Yes.
was a handful of idiots,
Yeah.
not the people that are making tweets or, actually being sensible and raising their hands in a sensible way to
A lot of
say,
just concerned people, concerned
of course
parents,
they were.
because we've only got like, half an hour, 40 minutes. So how did that progress? Did it kind of calm down a little bit after a while? Or did you throw yourself into it? Because I know that you went on various sort of marches, you spoke in marches, and was there a surprise for people when you stood up? I think you went on the can't even name it, the TR march. Was there a big surprise and a reaction to you doing that?
So I'm really glad you've asked that question. So I have always been vocal at pro-life.
Yes,
Okay, so I was marching, with the pro-life march in London with Calvin Robinson, and
yes,
we were together at that. I, in terms of unite the kingdom,
yes,
what I was very clear on, and I spoke this very, very clearly, was I wasn't here to endorse anybody. I was here for the people of the nation.
yes.
And I actually said that very, very clearly, at the beginning.
Mhm.
Now, and I was able to give a blessing at the end of that day.
Mhm.
And I just realized that here were hurting people.
Yeah.
Uh, and TR had highlighted some massive failures in the nation, but
Mhm.
I wanted to actually reassure those people,
Mhm.
around that, around their thinking and their stance and their hurt and their pain, and I spoke very much into that, on the day. When we came to, and I saw you briefly
Yes.
at Free the Political Prisoners,
Yeah.
it was exactly for that reason. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not supportive. It means that as a priest, I have to stay independent, and I've always tried to do that. And you will find me calling out conservatives, and you'll find me calling out Labour, you'll find me calling out anyone that's involved in injustice.
Yes.
Because the kingdom of God is righteousness. It's about justice. And I quoted Amos, let just justice flow, like rivers, and righteousness like ever flowing streams. It's about justice. And so what I felt I needed to be, having had the response from the video that I put out, was for a people who had been desperate for the church to
Mhm.
stand up for them
Mhm.
and the church not. And so I actually stood on the platform in was it October? I think it was
Something like that.
October.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I actually said I want to apologize for the church because
Mhm.
we've let you down.
Mhm.
We haven't spoken up. We haven't held to account. And I highlighted that in the central lobby of the Houses of Parliament, there is engraved in the floor that the MPs walk over each day, a verse from Psalms which says, "Unless the Lord builds the house, those that do so labor in vain." And we're a Christian country. And,
Mhm.
and the church should be speaking out for righteousness and for justice. And we've not. So,
Mhm.
and I only became aware, Liam, of the reality of how, kind of how the church has mismanaged the nation and not advocated for the nation and not advocated for the parishioners, and
Mhm.
realize that that's the reason for empty churches.
Yeah.
um and so that, yeah, so that was the thing I became aware of post video and post the virality
Were you
of that video.
criticised? Were you criticised, and then people confirming and said, "Oh, yeah, he's far right because he went on that march." Was there a reaction?
Do you know what I did after? In I think it was October, but let's just say it was October. So the Unite the Kingdom. What I did after I gave the blessing was I went and I walked amongst the crowds,
Yes.
and that was the most humbling experience, Liam. In fact, yeah, you can. It was just really humbling because people are hurting.
Yes.
People are really, really hurting in the nation, and clergy are supposed to be shepherds, and they're supposed to take care of the flock. And we have no idea the hurt and the pain that is in the nation right now. And that was a humbling experience for me, just to go, having blessed these people as a priest, and then going to walk in amongst ordinary people,
Yeah.
um, and realizing the pain and the disappointment and the fact that nobody has been able to speak up for them.
I think that's what makes you quite a heroic figure because, well, if you actually go back to Jesus, Jesus was kind of like a firebrand who, his thing was the people, wasn't it? I mean, he just went to love the people and look after the people. So I think what you have done has been very commendable. And of course, now what has happened to you very recently, you've been hit again by being sort of cancelled at your own church. And wasn't that church also your father also part of that church?
Yeah. So I'll try and keep this together because I've
Yeah.
gone through the last 4 weeks. So it was literally 4 weeks on Monday that what happened. In that period, there's been kind of this up and down,
Mhm.
of all kinds of emotions. We came to lockdown in 2020,
Mhm.
in COVID, and my dad was the minister of St James Church,
Mhm.
and my dad became ill. So May, Ruth and myself were in Australia. We got stranded in Australia because everything got locked down.
Mhm.
We got back very late April from Australia, and my dad wasn't well.
Mhm.
And so I took my dad, and of course, it's COVID. Hospitals are all social distancing, all the kind of nonsense that we had then. We won't go into that one. Did I just give my
That's
kind of
another
thoughts on
story.
it? Sorry.
Yeah.
But
I'm
um,
with you all the way. Yeah.
but my dad had various scans and he had a misdiagnosis,
Mhm.
and he became ill, nothing to do with COVID, but simply because there was a misdiagnosis in all the furore of COVID. And but we had people desperate, so churches were closed.
Mhm.
Don't get me started on that one. Uh,
Yes.
and I and I spoke to Archbishop Justin personally about that one. So
Yeah.
churches were closed. So what do we do? So we set up a parish church
Mhm.
online with
Yeah.
permission of bishops, called St Jude and St James.
Mhm.
St Jude, Liam, is the patron saint of lost causes, or
Right.
if you flip it the other way, the patron saint of hope.
Hmm.
and people were lost and they needed hope.
Yes.
And then the St. James bit was a nod to my father, who was at St. James.
Hmm.
So it was the parish church of St. Jude and St. James, and St. James is the patron saint of pilgrims.
Right.
And so we've got these people who are pilgrims on a journey who have lost hope. That was the précis. And so we did online church on Zoom on the, and we were having 100 people. And so we came out of lockdown, and my father sadly was taken ill with cancer.
Hmm.
And on as he was really ill, he made me promise that I'd make sure that St. James was okay. Now, my
No.
role, I'd stepped out of parish life and I was working for bishops and archbishops,
Hmm.
in and around the world. And so I went to when my dad was promoted to glory, I took my father's funeral at St. James,
Hmm.
presided over that. And that was a really tough thing to do because it was 3 years previous, more or
Hmm.
less to the day, that I'd taken my mom's funeral in the same church.
Ah.
I sat down with the trustees of the church. This is a Methodist tradition church, but John Wesley was an Anglican clergyman till his
Hmm.
dying day. So
Hmm.
there wasn't a massive conflict of interest. But I went to the trustees and I said to them, let me help you find a new minister, because my dad actually asked if I'd make sure the church was okay. To cut a long story short, I ended up as the minister.
So this
And
church has huge personal significance for you.
well, when I was doing everything to not become the minister.
Hmm.
We were going to go to Australia and form a parish and work within the church in Australia,
Yeah.
and we were kind of, that's what we were doing. So this wasn't part of the economy. However, when I'm working or Ruth is clearing out my dad's house, we find my mom's baptismal certificate
Hmm.
for the 27th of December 1931, where
Hmm.
she was baptized in St. James. And I went, I've got to fix this church. I've got
Hmm.
to actually make sure this church has a future. And so the bishop wrote a license under what was known as an LPA, um, a local partnership agreement between ourselves and the Methodist, the Wesleyan Reformed Union.
Hmm.
And so that was how I was ministering. So just immense familial connections. And then I discovered that my nan's Bible, my mom's Bible, which was also from St. James. So this is
Yes.
a huge, my nan's church, my mom's christened there, and my dad promoted to glory, leaving the scene of time as the minister. And so huge familial connections.
Hmm.
Um, on the 5th of February, the Charity Commission wrote to a trust where I'm a trustee, which is a Church of England Mission Society, and also wrote the same letter to St. James, pointing out two divisive videos, the one we've talked about from the 3rd of
Hmm.
August and one from the end of January, post Southport,
Hmm.
which actually affirmed everything that I'd said in the first video was
Yes.
true. Yeah.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
so I took advice from Christian Concern. They looked over the videos, they transcribed them, they had lawyers look at them, and they came back and said they're that clean you could eat your dinner off them. There is nothing to see here. And so they advised the charity that I was a trustee of, and they did a robust response to the Charity Commission. And in reality, this is someone fishing and trying to throw a hand grenade in to get me cancelled. Yeah,
Yes.
not because there's any substance here. However, what the church did was panic,
Hmm.
and so they arrived on the 5th. They never watched the videos in question. Just the fact they'd received a letter from the Charity Commission was the unforgivable sin,
Hmm.
not realizing that the Charity Commission can be weaponized against people. And they met on the 14th and decided, under the pretense of the video, the Charity Commission letter, and the fact that They decided overnight that they didn't like the style of the services, despite the church growing by 350%. This is seven people making a decision, you know. And they on the 14th made a decision to actually remove me as the minister, which as
So
church.
how did that emotionally make you feel? I mean, that must have been devastating for you because, as I say, with all those family connections, that you must have been devastated.
So devastated because I loved every single one of them, and I compromised the way that I would normally do church to
Mhm.
help facilitate them who had served the church well. And bearing in mind that five of them are in their 80s, two are in their 70s. And all that I wanted to see was them end their race well. And
Mhm.
so I had compromised the way that I would lead a church just to show grace and love for them. And I would have given my life for any one of them. Any
Mhm.
one of them I would have given my life for. And so they made a decision on the 14th of February. They went through 3 Sundays, of which I had bishops from the US in the house, in the church. We held a conference in the church. I flew to Australia, to Australia, to America for synod, came back, and on the Monday, which was the 3rd, so they've gone 3 weeks and a weekend, they
Mhm.
tell me that they are terminating me. And the worst thing about that was I locked up the church that day,
Mhm.
that, having them gone home, all my library, which is an extensive library, my ministerial accoutrements, my robes were all in the vestry. I turn camera equipment as well, and I turn up the following day so I can take Bible study remotely, only to discover they've changed the locks.
It's cowardly. It really is. It's shocking.
Heartbreaking. And so what happened then? I put a note in the church WhatsApp group at
Mhm.
3:31 on a really conciliatory note saying I'm very disappointed, implied that I was heartbroken, and the WhatsApp group blew up.
Mhm.
And people are going, "What's going on?" And in the meeting, it was implied that, and the meeting, by the way, was recorded on video, and the Archbishop joined. So what anybody says, and I never want to make the video public, and I just don't want to. It
Mhm.
was all recorded on video, but at 3:31, I went through to the vestry. I put a conciliatory message saying I'm available to you all. It blows up, and I realised that what they'd said in the meeting, that this was the will of the trustees and the members, wasn't true. It was
Mhm.
actually the will of the trustees, and they removed me from the WhatsApp group and locked the WhatsApp group so no one could actually post any further comments. It wasn't the will of the members of the church. This was an action taken by the trustees,
Mhm.
which was which really hurt, really, really, really hurt. Because I'd shown an intent interest in each of those trustees.
Mhm.
So what then happened was people started contacting me, and
Mhm.
I realized that all of the church, apart from the trustees and maybe some diehards that would continue to go no matter what because that was their church and they'd always been there,
Mhm.
were actually supporting me. So what do I do? And the questions were put to me of going, well, where do we meet on Sunday?
Before you get to that, did you have any communication with the trustees? I mean, these are people that you'd worked with for a long time, you had a relationship with. Did any of them sort of email you and say, look, I'm really sorry that this has happened? Anything?
Nothing.
What do you feel about that? I mean, that people, surely the whole point, and also being Christian in a way, is that you stand up for people. You stand up for what's right. You stand behind the person who's being tortured or, whatever. You stand up.
You'd think, wouldn't you? And this is, can I just make a point here, Liam?
Yeah.
I need to apologize to your viewers for the way the church behaves at times. I need to just make that point.
Yeah.
And the someone many years ago said, I'll never go to church because it's full of hypocrites."
Mhm.
And I said, look, please come along because another one won't make any difference, because in reality we're all hypocrites, aren't we?
Yes.
And you know what has happened here is failed, flawed human beings
Mhm.
treating people inappropriately in a non-Christian way. Now,
But it's also about backbone. Do you
it
have
is.
any backbone?
Okay, so here's the issue, and this is a point that I'd like to raise. We are now living in a different age. We're living in a different age in 2025 to even what 2020 was like.
Yeah.
In 2020, we're living in a different age to what 2010 was like.
Mhm.
And if we go back another 10 years, it's a completely different age to
Mhm.
the millennium and the, you know, us turning, you know, into, you know, the year 2000.
Mhm.
And what we actually have here are 7 trustees, 5 in their 80s and 2 in their 70s. And we have to ask the question around how we form charity trusts in the UK. Because what does it look like when you're not part of a social media age, that you're fed what the mainstream media feeds you because you watch
Mhm.
the bias.
BBC.
Yeah, you know, you watch the media and
Mhm.
you're not aware of what's going on in the wider world.
Mhm.
What does that look like? So I have to give some sort of get out of jail card here,
Mhm.
because these are good people that invested their life. And the shock and horror of having a letter from the Charity Commission is something that's like, you know, unheard of for them.
Mhm.
And so we have to look at how you know, we set up charities, do we not, to make sure that we've got a mix of expertise.
Mhm.
And when you have denominations that are struggling in themselves because they forgot what the message of the church is, and the
Mhm.
church is about making disciples and constantly being refreshed, and
Mhm.
the Christian faith being something that's dynamic and vibrant, um,
Mhm.
we've got to a point where we have 7 people making a decision.
Mhm.
And what actually happened was we got to the Thursday, and I messaged one of the trustees and I said, I need to facilitate getting access to the building to get my things out. And the thing that he said was, I'm so sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah. And he you know, access was granted. But that's the only communication I had
Mhm.
since the letter broke on the 5th, was a letter actually inviting me to a meeting with the trustees. There's
Mhm.
been no communication. There's been no communication since, other than when I collected my belongings, some sacred cloths that are used for Holy Communion. There appeared to be one missing, and I messaged one of the
Mhm.
trustees, who came back to me kind of politely. Um, but that's been it. There's been no connection. There's been no reaching out. There's been no dialogue, um,
Mhm.
you know, kind of since.
Can I ask you a
Other than
personal question? Can I ask you, have you questioned your faith during this?
no,
The fact that you've been put in that position?
no,
Okay,
no, because
fabulous.
desperate people do desperate things, whether they're Christian or not. You know,
Mm,
I know a. So the message that I put out in August is true. The message I put out in in January, in terms of the videos, the retweets that I make are true, because I actually know of a God who sent His Son to die on a cross for us, and Jesus said, and it's one of the most discouraging verses in the Bible, but one of the most, you know, profound: in this world you will have tribulation. And the Greek
yeah.
word there is trials. Yeah, so in this world, and so I'm kind of going, yeah, onward Christian soldiers and all of that.
And of course, there's a happy kind of ending in a way to this because you found a new location to go to.
Well, look, we're doing something. We need a new building. We're going to have to get a new building.
Mm,
And we're looking at that at the moment. And what I have never done is sought to raise funds for me. Can I just
mm,
make that? But we're going to put a fundraiser out to raise funds to buy a new building, and it's going to be a double whammy, because
mm.
we're going to save this building that we've seen from
Yes.
falling into the wrong hands.
Hmm.
So it's
Hmm.
going to preserve an empty building and fill it full of life, where
Hmm.
we can defend the faith, declare the good news of Jesus, without any pressures of wokery, with
Mhm.
bishops that love and support and will protect.
Mhm.
However, that said and done, so look out for that, and maybe somewhere you can promote that when it goes live. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah,
There's my shameless plug.
yeah.
However, in the meantime, what we're doing is we took the name of St Jude and St James and we
Mhm.
put ITC after it in the
Right.
community, and
I
we
love
went 800 yards down the road,
it.
and we went to the Sports and Social Club, who have opened their doors to us, welcomed us, and we're celebrating Mass every Sunday in the Sports and Social Club. And I'm having people turn up last Sunday who walked up the stairs to come into the room. And just for those that may want to come, there is a lift as well. But walked up
Yes.
the stairs and he went, "Hey, my name is, and
Mhm.
I saw you on Maya Tuesday, and I've
Mhm.
just come to help." And so
Wonderful. So
the build.
where if you want to go, where is this social club at the moment?
Okay, so the social club, you can find the address on St Jude and St James dot church. So that's
Mhm.
St Jude
Yeah.
and and St James dot church.
Mhm.
And I'll give you the link, Liam, and you can post that
Yes.
afterwards. Um,
Yes.
and the address is there, but it's actually at the Sports and Social Club in Cradley Heath, 10:30 every Sunday morning. And afterwards, you'll see me in my cassock downstairs mixing with the locals. And
Yeah.
it's been a profound time. And I think that the Sports and Social Club said, "Will you do a carol service here at Christmas?" Of course we will. And so
Yeah.
it's just been connecting with people who in the Black Country are the salt of the earth. So
Yes.
if you're in the West Midlands, come along. If you don't have a regular place of worship, that is, come along, engage. It's just been a blessing. And
Mhm.
so what we actually discovered was the majority of the church, apart from, as I say, 15 people who are meeting in the old building,
Mhm.
um, are are with us, and it's generated an excitement in the
Yeah.
community.
How do you feel after this whole thing? You've had this 4 weeks. Are you exhausted by it?
Yes,
How are you?
utterly exhausted. I know I'm smiling now. Every morning has been a struggle to get out of bed, not because there isn't a purpose to get out of bed, but because I'm just wrecked. I'm just so tired.
Yeah.
Mondays I have as my rest day, and I did very little on Monday. Um,
Mhm.
but you know, I believe in a good God.
Mhm.
That's the
Can
message.
I ask a very practical question here? Financially, does that mean that the church no longer support you by having to go out? Do you no longer get a wage from them?
Well, here's the nutty thing. For
Right.
3 years, I had ulterior kind of income when I took the post, and I never took a penny out of St James. Me
Right.
and my deacon, because he also he's a director of a mission society. He has a salary from that, and I
Mhm.
had other income. That income actually dried up about 2.5 years ago, post
Right.
COVID,
Yes.
and I have supported the church off my own savings
Right.
for the last 2.5 years, and kind of Ruth works, and we have just lived off the favor of God, and that's been okay. But what it's meant now is we have to find a new building, and I'm really blessed by people who've gone to my Twitter and bought me a coffee. Yeah,
Yes.
because we have taken a massive financial hit, but actually we know a God who is gracious to us, and so it has
It's so
cost a great deal.
admirable. But when you think that you weren't even being paid and you put all that work in and all that time and that spiritual energy and you got kicked out because you just happened to have an opinion that was supportive of people. I mean, it's outrageous.
So true faith, St James tells us, is actually to look after the widow and the orphans. And so when you look at defending women that have been abused,
Mm.
and when we look at the people that were disaffected, Jesus spoke about those people. And unfortunately, what the church has made faith about is being nice and loving everybody.
Mhm.
And my friend Calvin Robinson tweeted yesterday about pray the precatory psalms, which are those psalms that actually are talking about justice and defense against enemies, etc. And Jesus actually, in his language, woe to you, you Pharisees. You know, he's very much for justice, and he stands up for women who have been kicked out of a marriage with no rights or whatever. And so we have to speak up. And Jesus spoke up. St. Peter spoke up. St. Paul spoke up. St. James spoke up. We have to get our voice back as a church again.
Absolutely. Now I know that you have to go because you've got things to do. Final thing is there anything, you know, some people watching this will be religious, some people won't be religious, but do you have a little sort of piece that maybe you could say to people who are having a tough time? There's so many people out there at the moment are having difficult times, just as you've had a difficult time. Is there a kind of psalm or a piece that you could say to them that might give them a bit of hope and encouragement?
Great question to ask a priest. Um, May the God of all comfort and grace comfort you. And, you know, we have a God of hope. And the Christian message is all about hope. But that hope is only founded within the truth of Jesus, who points us to a heavenly Father. And so when I spoke at Unite the Kingdom, I actually said these words: 2024, I nearly said 2025 then. 2024 what? 2024 since the birth of Christ. Jesus changed the world. And if you are not religious, I actually then said something else. 10 what? 10 commandments. And those 10 commandments about how we live as a society. And people were saying to me, I'm a cultural Christian. And my message is to you: do the right thing. But the first commandment, and love the right thing. The prophet Micah, in Micah 6:8, he's shown you, O man, what is good and what God requires of you: to do justly, love mercy, walk humbly with God. And if you're not a Christian, you can do the first two things: do justly, do what's right, love what's right. And then thirdly, and this is my imploration as a priest, and give me some license here, please, Liam, you know, walk humbly with God. Yeah, just try and work out your life in a way that's pleasing to God. I know the reality of God. That's why I'm prepared to speak up for people and stand for justice, because it's who my God is, and I outwork that. And I'm just grateful that I'm afforded the opportunity to actually outwork my faith in front of you all. And I give you permission, anybody of your viewers, if you don't see me walking the walk, tell me.
That is absolutely fantastic, and we wish you great success in you know, getting a new venue. We wish you great success in, you know, in the social club at the moment. And what would be lovely at some point is in future to come down and when you get this new venue, to see you maybe do your first sermon or something. It'd be lovely to
Great.
film you.
Yeah, that absolutely. We Liam, thank you so much. We've been promising to do this kind of, you know, chat
Yeah.
for a little while now, and actually the timing of this is probably very good. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. And may Godspeed and grace and peace be upon all your viewers.